Good evening, everybody. Here we are again. This is our sixth time together in a short period of time, 6 in a row. Before I start with my actual remarks, I just wanted to remind you of the importance of this doctrine of dependent origination. Why am I spending almost all night tonight talking about this thing? Remember that the Buddha said that there were two things that he realized that contributed to him being enlightened. One was Nirvana, and one was dependent origination. So obviously this was exceptionally important to him, and it has been all the way through Buddhist history. So that's why the focus is so detailed tonight, because it's really central. Okay. The last time we looked at the first two links in the circle of dependent origination within Buddhism, those relating to our past experience and how they generate our current one or influence it. So tonight we'll focus on the rest of the 12 links. Links 3 through 10 relate to our present existence, while 11 and 12 point to a future existence based on the karma accumulated through links 1 to 10. So I'm going to show you two alternate visualizations of this foundational Buddhist doctrine. And you'll recall that we discussed ignorance and formation in the last class. So let me just bring these up. Oh, I have to, sorry. Share screen, that's what I'm doing. Okay. So here's a new view of it. And as you can see, we start with ignorance at the top and formations to the right of it. Those are the two from the past. And then all the way from consciousness, all the way down around the circle, all the way up to becoming, relate to the present day or to our present life. I sent these out ahead of time so that you might have had a chance to look at them. This one, I wish I could have gotten a better quality. This is the only one I could find. I have a much better one in a book, but it just wouldn't print out properly or scan properly. So it gives you all of the Sanskrit terms and shows you some breaks here. We're going to see a big important break between 7 and 8, between feeling and craving a little later. And you'll see that 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are considered the passive side of life. And then 8, 9, and 10 are the active side. Okay, so let's go back to our reading. So, well, maybe, let me just bring this one up. Okay, so the links of the present are divided into two groups. The first group, links 3 to 7, are called karmic result. The second group, that's 8, 9, and 10. It should be on the other one, which have numbers. 8, 9, and 10. So craving, attachment, and action or becoming are called karma producing. They're the ones that are active. They create new karma. So the karmic results one, back here, to the right and the bottom half, are those aspects of our current situation that occur as automatic fruits of our past actions in this system of thinking. So because of things that happened in our previous life, we're stuck with our circumstances. Resting on ignorance, karmic formations, which we saw was number 2 up here, give rise to the consciousness which goes to the birthplace of our next existence. So this new consciousness has two aspects. Impelling consciousness is the seed placed in what's called the alaya consciousness. That's sort of like the ground where everything descends to and ends up living. And the impelled result is that which leads to the birthplace of that life once the conditions have come together. But both of these are in fact one in terms of being the link consciousness uses to establish a rebirth. Okay, so that's just a quick Review of 1 and 2. In order for conception to occur, 3 causes must come together. The woman must be in her season, the male and female must unite, and there must be a consciousness seeking rebirth in the kind of karmic situation provided by the potential mother and father. If these conditions are present, the male substance, the sperm, and the female substance, the ovum, join. And the consciousness enters to produce an embryo. In Buddhism, this is explained as the arising of the 5 bundles or aggregates, the skandhas that we heard about last time: name, feeling, perception, karmic formations, and consciousness. So let's jump over to number 1 and go backwards in our list. So I think Sherry is online. I saw her face was not there, but her calling card was there.
Yes, I'm here. Okay,
could you read the first one for us?
Sure. I'm not sure about pronunciation, but Mifam Rinpoche says that these 5 constitute the body of that existence by means of mutually supporting each other, as in the case of the roof beams of a house. Now the being has the basic psychophysical structure necessary to human existence. Reginald Ray.
So I think it's Rinpoche. That's the way I've heard it over the years. I think it's Mifam, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, your guess is as good as mine. So those 5 that we've talked about before: name, feeling, perception, karmic formations, and consciousness, provide the structure for a new human being. Once the period of name and form has been fully completed, let me just see if we've got that listed on our list here. Yeah, see name and form here. So these first 2 are from the past. Consciousness and name and form are the first 2 of the beginning of a new life. So the 5 bundles give birth to a further system of wiring, if you like. This is composed of the 6 senses, which is down here near the bottom, which receive impressions from sense objects. These include the material senses, the sense organs of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, and the mental sense organ, mind, each with its corresponding object. Now the rebirth consciousness has the infrastructure needed to begin to experience things. So let's go down to 6, which is phasa, or contact. Now that the complete psychophysical infrastructure is in place, the next stage of karmic unfoldment is contact, the meeting of each sense organ with its corresponding sense object. In terms of the physical senses, the eye has contact with visible objects, the ear with sounds, the nose with scents, the tongue with tastes, and the body with touchable objects. The mental sense, the mind or receptive consciousness, now has contact with mental concepts or contents such as thoughts, mental images, feelings, and complex emotions. Each meeting of sense organ with sense object is registered or cognized by a corresponding consciousness. For example, the eye perceives a visual object, which is then registered by the eye consciousness. The data of eye consciousness itself becomes an object for the mind organ that is registered by mind consciousness. So the 6 sense organs, the 6 sense objects, and the 6 sense consciousnesses are known in the Abhidharma as the 18 aspects, or dhatus. Dhatus is the word in Sanskrit. Okay, so they're setting up the components of a complete worldly existence. Let's go back here, and I believe we're at Nina now, if you wouldn't mind. 2.
Who did you say, Mark?
Nina.
Sorry, Nina. You're muted, Nina. Can you unmute yourself? There she goes.
Yeah, no, but I cannot read because I'm on a cell phone.
Oh, you can't read? Oh, okay. Fair
No,
enough.
I'm just listening because I have a cell phone.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
No problem. Eva, are you online? I didn't see
No.
you earlier.
Eva is not here. No.
Oh, okay. How about Linda Russell?
Okay. Reading number 2. Thereafter, the objects, sense faculties, and consciousnesses will meet together, and the 6 contacts will arise, such as perception through the contacts of the form of an object, meeting with the eye. This is the link of contact.
Just slightly larger if I can. Just a second. I think it's a bit too small. There, that's better. Okay. All right, so all of these things have to interact. The organs, the objects that are pertinent to that organ, and then consciousness somehow has to be involved for there to be a recognition that something has been noticed. Okay, so back we go to the, oops, this one here. Now we get down to the feeling aspect. Contact leads to basic or rudimentary experience, which is felt as positive, pleasurable, negative or painful, or neutral. So these are the 3 types of reactions we have to everything that we perceive. As one of the karmic result links, it is important to realize that feeling represents the inevitable fruition of past karma. In other words, whether a particular experience is felt as positive, negative, or neutral is without choice, since it has been determined by the karma accumulated in the past. So we won't like a particular smell, or we'll fall in love with a particular kind of face, or whatever the range of possibilities are. Okay. So all of these preceding links that we've just talked about, and we can see that on this chart here, I think. The karmic result. So 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. This passive side of life are the karmic result in the sense that they are the natural and unavoidable result of the multiplicity of past causes and conditions that are now coming to fruition. The karmic result links provide the givenness of our life over which we have no control. In this sense, these links are all morally neutral. This means that whatever arises in our experience, including our own feelings of pleasure or pain, has no particular moral direction, and in and of itself produces no future karma, either good or bad. So this is contrary to the habitual ways of thinking in the modern West. Here, many people feel that if a particular negatively charged thought or emotion appears in their minds, something morally wrong is happening. They feel that because they are experiencing pain, they must be guilty of some offense and must be generating negative karma. Buddhism replies that while present pain is the result of previous negative action, its appearance at this moment is neutral and in itself generates no future karma. The karmic implications of past karma ripening in the present depend entirely on how we respond to it. So, karma is only produced in 8, 9, and 10, the active side of life. It's true that we have no control over the ripening of past karma in the present moment. This limits the scope of human freedom considerably. However, the next 3 links make it clear that the Buddhist doctrine of causality is far from fatalistic. In fact, it insists on the reality and critical importance of the freedom that we do have. Now let's look at craving, which is also known as thirst. How do we respond to the positive and negative feelings that occur in our lives? Typically, we become immediately embroiled in what Buddhism calls thirst. We thirst to pull the positive towards us and possess it, making it part of our personal territory. We also thirst to drive away the negative, to keep it far from our ego domain. This is the ego's attempt to further fortify and aggrandize itself. So the word aggrandize, which I'm not saying properly, means to make great or greater, to make appear great or greater, or to praise highly, to enhance the power, wealth, position, or reputation of something. In this case, yourself, your ego. It's always trying to promote its own interests, to puff itself up to be something bigger than it is at the moment. Thirst that is, sorry, let me try this. Thirst is impulse that is agreed to. It involves the complicity of the ego. In thirst, we experience an impulse and say yes to it. We go along with it. We deliberately jump into a pool of wanting, hankering, desiring, hungering, craving, lusting. Okay. Thirst isn't something that is given in our experience, as it was in these 3 to 7. It is something that we intentionally manufacture based on self-serving motivations of ego aggrandizement. The movement into thirst involves the generation of new karma. So these guys are being real phenomenologists way back 2000 some years ago. They're looking with intensity at what actually goes on as they interact with their worlds, and they're specifying it. So this is why neuroscientists today are so interested in what Buddhism had to say, because they're finding that they're studying almost the same kinds of things, maybe with slightly different language. But there's a lot to share between them. Okay, so let's take a look at the readings again, and I need, how about Harold to read number 3 for us?
Yes, reading number 3. Based on sensation arises the eager craving of desiring not to be separated from a pleasant sensation, the fearful craving of desiring to cast away an unpleasant sensation, and a self-sufficient abiding in regard to indifferent sensations. Thus arises a craving towards the 6 objects of the 6 senses, from forms to mental objects. In short, the link of craving is to experience the taste of the objects caused by sensation and to draw in these objects because of taking delight in clinging to them.
There's that key word clinging again that we were talking about last time. That's the root of the problem right there, is that clinging. Okay, let's go back to our little wheel of life here. And now, in some cases, it's referred to as grasping, sometimes as attachment. Number 9. Thirst is a state of mind and does not yet involve any activity. Once we have concocted our thirst, we move very quickly to the next link, which is grasping. The attempt to grasp involves the effort of putting our thirst into action. Either we try to grab onto that which we feel is positive, or we try to ward off that which we feel is negative. While thirst is mental, grasping usually involves either the body in the case of physical actions, or speech in the case of verbal actions. As we attempt to actualize our thirst, grasping involves further intentional self-serving activity and generates future karma. So 4 classes of objects are said to be the objects of grasping. There's the objects of sense desire. In other words, the objects of the 5 sense organs. There are views or beliefs about reality. which are objects of the mind organ. There's clinging to rituals or disciplines, which is the grasping of the religious fanatic. And there's the idea of a self. So we're clinging on to a great deal all the time. And grasping at things that enhance those connections. Number 10, action or becoming, brings the process of the generation of new karma to its culmination. Based on our grasping, we arrive at the point of a seemingly solid self. It doesn't matter whether or not we've been able to possess the object of our grasping. If we have managed to possess it, we conceive of ourselves as one who has gained that particular object, a new car, for instance. If we've been unsuccessful, then we think of ourselves as one who has not gained that particular thing. In either case, the belief in a solid self has now its culmination and fruition. Once this point is reached, all the seeds that have been planted for a future lifetime. So as we said, links 8, 9, and 10. So craving, attachment, and becoming involve activity that produces further karma. For many of us, the activities of these links involves manipulating, ignoring, and harming others. This produces negative karma and will lead to future suffering for us, either rebirth in a lower realm or at least increased suffering as a human being. The precise degree of negative karma we produce depends on the degree of passion, aggression, or delusion of our actions, and on the negative impacts on others. At the same time, we can engage in links 8, 9, and 10 in a way that produces positive karma. Perhaps we are disgusted with our own self-serving actions, feel some sympathy for others, or are afraid of the negative karma that we have been accumulating. Suppose we then identify some worthy person that we could help, perhaps someone who is ill or poor, and suppose we help them in some way. This will produce positive karma. It's important to realize that this process is not without ego and involves links 8, 9, and 10. We experience pain because of who we are, and we are afraid of our own future pain. So we give something. Here we are thirsting to attain better karmic circumstances. So that's number 8. We're craving better circumstances. We put this thirst into action by our helping of that person, of attaching. And we end up feeling some satisfaction in what we did, thinking of ourselves as a person who has helped someone else and who in the process has improved his or her karmic life. That's number 10. Nice feedback loop. So although meritorious and demeritorious actions are similar in both producing karma, they differ in the solidity of the egocentricity they involve. Demeritorious actions, which generate negative karma, proceed from a strong belief in the separateness of oneself and in the legitimacy of aggrandizing oneself at the expense of others. Demeritorious actions thus imply a solid and self-absorbed ego. In this case, the Buddha nature within is more or less completely obscured. By contrast, meritorious actions, which generate positive karma, have a much less solid and walled-off sense of I. In fact, by acknowledging one's interconnectedness with others and one's moral obligation to respond to their needs, meritorious actions imply an ego that is relatively lighter and less obscured than that of a completely self-centered person. So there you can see the beginnings of ethics in Buddhism. You could say that such actions reflect an ego that is more or less transparent to qualities such as selfless love and compassion that are evident, though not entirely without the taint of ego, as the individual has not yet attained realization. So meritorious actions thus manifest a moment when we are closer to enlightenment and sowing seeds to generate conditions enabling us to advance further in that direction. So there's a clear preference for the meritorious action. All of this raises an important question. Are we as human beings condemned to move from the karmic results links 3 to 7 to the karma producing links 8 to 10? Must we always be engaged in creating karma, whether it be negative or positive? The answer is no. Between links 7 and 8, there is a gap in the process of ego. Between feeling the final karmic result nidana or link and the first karmic producing link, there is an open space. Oh, in other words, right here, this long line between 7 and 8 is a very important break in the circle. There is no no inevitability here and no predetermination. This is the point where we have freedom. Whether one takes the next step to thirst is really a matter of personal choice, even though it is a step we habitually take without acknowledging that the choice was present. Why do we do so? Well, because it's more comfortable and less painful, more robust and fortifying to our sense of ego to ignore the gap. Like the Pied Piper's rats, it is easier to run with the pack onto links 8, 9, and 10. It is possible then for us to rest in the open space after feeling, right here. Without trying to do anything about it. However, the gap between feeling and thirst is a fleeting one, and it is generally most difficult for us to see this place, let alone be able to rest in it. For this reason, we need a method to enable us to take advantage of this openness in our own state of mind, to find it and to rest in it. This is the purpose of meditation. If we learn to be increasingly present to our own experience through mindfulness and through developing insight into the process of our own experience, our rampant discursiveness, think of your monkey mind, begins to slow down. As it does, we begin to see our impermanent experience as it comes into being and then disappears. And we begin to become aware of the links and how one link leads to the next, which is what the Buddha found that time. Through this meditative process, we begin to notice the gap between feeling and thirst, between 7 and 8. We begin to see that phenomena arise in our state of being in links 3 to 7. They appear as the givenness of our experience at each moment. Plus, we see that there is an additional movement on our part, one which is neither inevitable nor necessary. When we go from this givenness to the activities of thirst, grasping, and being. This in turn shows us the possibility of resting with the bare givenness of our experience and of resisting the temptation to manipulate our experience through thirst, grasping, and being. In fact, it may be said that the entire Buddhist path, including the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, consists in nothing more nor less than learning to rest in the gap between links 7 and 8, between feeling and thirst, ever more deeply and subtly, and in learning to see the implications of this resting for the way in which we live our lives. Now, does anybody have a question or comment? I think we need to take a bit of a breather here.
Yeah, Mark, yeah, I'd like to comment
Sure.
if I could. One way I learn things is try to compare my own experience and other models to
Okay.
something that's new. So this detailed analysis of, the dependent origination, a way of simplifying it might be saying, using Baha'i terms would be, this is all about detachment.
Mhm.
Another way, or, Baha'u'llah said, dying from self and living in God.
Yeah.
So the seven valleys describe the process of dying from self and living in God, and breaks it up into seven. And you gave us the model of Abdul Baha's stages of the soul, about 8 of them. And there were corresponding things in Aurobindo recently, that you shared with us about consciousness, the development of consciousness. And this looks like it's a very detailed, inner journey, looking at the processes that make us detached and the processes that lead us to choice, to the choice to rise above attachment. And it's funny, we only, in the West, we have a very limited vocabulary talking about such things, but it's a stunning how much detail the Buddha chose to go into. And I just want to say quickly my theory about that. It was necessary for the Buddha to do it because people were incredibly, they were in agony, in attachment to things like drugs, and the dependence on priests for everything. So enormous amount of dependence and attachment. And there was a class system, that prescribed detailed behavior and expectation, and everyone felt like they fell short of that. So there was a lot of moral, spiritual agony in the day in which Buddha, presented all this. And so people needed to be able to deconstruct their attachments and, as you say, karmic debts or whatever. Anyway, this is my attempt to try to make sense of some of this. And it has to be useful for us over here in the West. And in other words, there have to be corresponding concepts to almost everything you're describing. Using Ibn Arabi, Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, Aurobindo, they're talking about the rising of consciousness, which means choice and moral behavior and that sort of thing, ethics, and beyond that, spiritual aspiration to higher levels. Anyway, I'm sorry to talk so much, but I have a lot of connections to parts of what you're sharing, and we do need a lot of different versions of this. Like, I'm glad you tracked down a bunch of models of dependent origination, the 12, like a clock. And we need to kind of go through the numbers of the clock with different words. And even your models use slightly different words, right?
Yes, they do.
For the same process, which is meaning we shouldn't get too attached to any one thing we think we understand. Our favorite term, for example, for all of this, because there's other terms that other Buddhists, use to describe it.
It's true.
Anyway, I'll shut up. Thank you. This is amazing.
Well, I have to say, I take my hat off to you for noticing all the connections with all these previous people we've talked about. That's exactly why we're doing this review of Buddhism right now, because there are so many connections with Sri Aurobindo and with Abdul Baha and Baha'u'llah and et cetera, and Ibn Arabi even. So they can't all be wrong.
No.
And we've got now some different terminology to use from different parts of the world. So whichever ones we have most comfort with, I think we can go beyond just a straight Baha'i language. And every time we hear the word detachment, now we can think of it in 2 or 3 different ways. Joey has got her hand up there very patiently. What would you like to say?
It's more of a question. When you reach this gap where you want to remain, is that a state of complete detachment? So a stage of enlightenment, or if you reach that stage and are able to stay there, is that when you don't, in the Buddhist terms, then have a rebirth? I don't know if I'm
No, I
clear.
don't think so. I mean, this can be quite a common occurrence on a daily basis, hundreds of
Oh,
times.
okay.
So, I mean, if somebody asks you a question about how you feel about the truckers, you can pause and not say anything for quite a long time before you choose how you answer that question.
But if I still have feelings and I pause and don't say anything, I may not necessarily be detached.
That's true. That's where the meditation comes in. What are the feelings that you have? Why do you have them?
Okay.
What do you choose to do with them? How do you choose to express them or not? I
So
mean, it
then
just
you're actually
goes from there.
tying into the faith in terms of choice of action and being detached, and that whole element of how we understand our actions in terms of the faith.
Mhm. So, I mean, the logical first question for a Baha'i to ask in a situation like that is, how would Abdul Baha have responded to it? What would he do in this circumstance? Anyway, I mean, it's true of all the life decisions, and even things that you don't even think of as decision points. You have lots of choice. Who was the, Linda, you can help me with this. Who was the fellow, who was the survivor of the death camps? Who,
Eli
Wiesner?
Wiesel.
Why, okay, what was his point?
Victor Frankl.
Oh, you mean
Viktor
Victor
Frankl.
Frankl. Victor
Oh,
Frankl. You can
yeah.
choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah, Victor
So
Frankl.
he lived that in a dramatic way.
So Mark, do you see that David and Belinda have their hands up?
I do,
Lori?
and now Lori too, so, okay.
Remember
You're okay, Joey, with what we
something
said?
about what we were talking about, the question that was just asked. This afternoon, we were listening to Tapestry, and they were talking about Buddhist, Vietnam Buddhist, what was his name, David? Thai? He's well known.
The one who just died?
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh.
And at one point at a meeting, he was asked in a very rude way, he was asked a question like, why was he there talking to people in the West instead of helping the people in Vietnam? And he didn't answer right away. He was very, very quiet for several minutes. And then he answered, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was a really good answer. I think it was to the effect that he could do more for the people in Vietnam by being where he was, and so forth. And then when the meeting drew to a close, he left the room and went outside, and one of his disciples followed him out because he was a little worried, and he found this man outside breathing heavily and showing a great deal of distress. He was actually worried about him. When the man monk got his breath back and everything, he explained that the question had angered him very, very deeply, and that he had to take time to put the anger aside in order to answer the question the way it needed to be answered.
Mhm.
And what was happening then outside was he was just relieving the stress of having to do that. And it reminded me also of the story about Imam Ali in the middle of a battle, having to put his anger aside before he killed somebody. And so that he didn't do that action in anger. And that's just the pattern I drew from that. And that because somebody was talking about stepping aside from a feeling. And so there are these examples, and I think we can find similar examples with Abdu'l-Baha.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay, Lori, what did you want to say?
Just a little thing. Mark, when you said, you know, what would Abdu'l-Baha do? We were having a neighborhood devotional and somebody asked the question, what would Abdu'l-Baha do? And it wasn't directly related to the protest downtown, but a quick-witted person said, well, with the protest downtown, we'll never know what Abdu'l-Baha would do, but he wouldn't be sitting in the cab of a truck driving. So it was sort of a way to sort of ease some of those tensions. So I went to bed that night with the vision of Abdu'l-Baha with his flowing robes up in the truck.
Okay, any other thoughts at this point? I want to finish the circle off here if I can. The last two links, let me go back to my screen sharing. Oops. Oops, hit the wrong button. All right, let me do that again. There, okay. So the last two are number 11 and 12, birth and decay and death. So if we ignore the opportunity provided by the gap between links 7 and 8, and instead rush on to thirst, we will be impelled to grasping and then being, with no further opportunities to step out of ego's game. In this case, we will then move from being or becoming the last link of the present life to a new lifetime epitomized by 11, which is birth, and 12, old age and death. So number 11, if we choose not to rest in the gap between feeling and thirst, but continue on to being, then all the karma has been created for rebirth. And the inevitable result will be a new lifetime. Number 12, the final link states that birth is inevitably followed by old age and death. As Mifam Rinpoche says, from rebirth comes aging, which is the change in the continuity of the aggregates, the 5 skandhas, and death, which is the ceasing of that continuity. Okay, let's go.
Mark, sorry. Mark, can I comment on that last chart?
Oh,
Maybe you want to go to something else.
oh, go ahead.
You know, when the term past life, current life, and future life, I think it's more compatible with Buddha's original meaning to say previous level of existence, present levels of existence, and future levels of existence, or rebirth, to say previous rebirth realms, current realm, and future rebirth realm, something like that. So, but if you say reincarnation, the image that most people have of that, I think, is that you're in one human body, then you die, and then you go into another human body, and later you die, and then go into another human body. I don't think that's what Buddha meant. And I think that's an enormous misunderstanding between East and West regarding reincarnation and rebirth. In other words, the more neutral term, and I think less confusing, is to talk about rebirth. Rebirth is used in the West and in Baha'i language as well, and in Eastern language. But reincarnation, or first life, this life, and the next life, create images that are taken very literally, and I think deviate far from the original teaching. and in fact miss the whole purpose of Buddhism and Hinduism. They're to get you off the wheel. Not a rebirth into another life is almost like a warning. We're saying that to scare you out of getting stagnant in one existence. We want you to make progress. And there's plenty of quotes from Buddha's Dhammapada and elsewhere where he's talking about, for example, very short line here. The man who does evil suffers in both worlds. So two worlds, in other words, this realm and the next realm, right? And this world is preceded by things that happened, let's say, in the womb or in the mind of God when our soul was being formed. But to think of that as different bodies, living at different times as humans or animals or even plants really gets so far away. Anyway, sorry to get sucked in, but I've been into so many dialogues and fights about this. See, I think there's a lot of heat rather than light. It could be real sharing going on. Instead, there's battles and people get very upset if you are critiquing their view of reincarnation. Anyway, sorry.
It makes me think of Ken Wilber as you're talking, because he has a great deal to say about these things. One of the things that we're going to talk about is the levels of consciousness that human beings have access to. And this was the same type of thing in Aurobindo. Essentially, as you progress, what you're doing is dying to your previous level of consciousness.
Okay.
Doesn't that work?
And that's a metaphorical kind of dying, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's not the literal death at the age of 98 where they put your body in the ground. You see, yet people think of that.
Oh, of course
so
they do.
I suggest other language. That's all. Very good. Very good. Yeah.
And it also applies to psychological states. So,
okay.
I mean, we can take this wheel and apply it to many different levels of our own experience. You don't have to think of it in terms of, just the one lifetime and then the next lifetime, although it does apply there from a Baha'i perspective, but it also applies in much smaller periods of time as you're growing. Anyway, all right, let's see where we are at here. I think I was back on the readings. Okay, number 4, let me see here. Jennifer, are you okay with number 4?
From this knowledge of old age and death arises the sorrow, which is inner anguish, the lamentation uttered therefrom, the misery which accompanies the 5 sense consciousnesses, and the unhappiness which accompanies the mind consciousness. In addition arises distress caused by the unpleasant disturbing emotions. In short, this great mass of suffering results from rebirth within samsara.
Okay. So to round out my presentation of the doctrine of dependent origination, I'd like to show you 2 versions of the Buddhist path which counteract the 12 links of causation. The first is a simple chart which lists the key steps that Buddhists must travel to attain liberation or nirvana. There we are. So this down the left-hand side, if you go from ignorance all the way down to aging and death, are the 12 that were in a circle a minute ago. They all result in suffering. But it's possible through Buddhist practice to go all the way back up to Nibbana or Nirvana through all of these different stages. Now, I haven't got a, I'm not sure precisely where this diagram came from, but I was quite intrigued with the balance of it. I don't have each of these items listed in a chart somewhere where I can easily list them as the stages to enlightenment. But they may be there once we come to that place after we've looked at all the stages of meditation, which I haven't yet written, so I can't talk about specifically yet. But anyway, I think this is a fascinating way of putting that same information. And I like this second, or this next one even more. So here's the whole wheel that we were talking about just a minute ago in the red, and then the ascending move back to Nirvana in the green.
Mark, this is the arc of descent and the arc
You
of
got it.
ascent. Here we go again. It's
Yes.
deja vu all over again.
Absolutely right.
Sorry.
Yep. So you have on the left-hand side, you have the flood, which are all the steps of dependent origination. And then on the right, you have the raft, which is the name given to the noble eightfold path by the Buddha himself. So as you will no doubt see, there is a clear likeness to the arcs of descent and ascent we have been exploring throughout this course. Aha. Okay,
Mark,
yes.
Suzanne had a question. Suzanne, would you like to ask your question? It's a question in the chat, but
Oh, okay, I wasn't noticing the chat.
Oh, no, I was just asking you to talk a little more about reincarnation and how it seems to be at odds with Baha'i religion.
Mhm.
I know it's a very complicated thing and who knows, right? But just wondering if you had more to say about that.
Well, Abdu'l-Baha certainly had no time for the idea of, becoming I don't know, some sort of a fox next lifetime or a slug or something. This is not possible from the Baha'i perspective, that you'll move on to the next world. And there seems, from what I can tell, to be quite a range of possible worlds in the next world, or levels, if you like, domains. I don't know what you want to call them, but, and I think they're related in some way to what you've done here. So to some extent, there's something to be said for karma. I'm not quite sure how far to push it, but surely there is something in the Baha'i faith which agrees with the notion of karma, and particularly in terms of your ethics and how you treat other people.
Yes.
So, but when it comes to reincarnation, I think Harold's points that he was making a little bit earlier are quite pertinent. That
I didn't
people
quite
have-
get it. That I didn't quite get. I was asking the question as he was speaking. I didn't quite
Oh,
get what
okay.
he said.
Okay, so I guess I should ask Harold, but my sense of what he was saying is that people have jumped to conclusions as to what the Buddha was actually saying, and chose to interpret it in such a way that it was always about the next world and the previous world that you've been inhabiting. Whereas that doesn't necessarily reflect what he was actually saying. Because there are many worlds right here on this planet. In the person you're meeting, there's a separate world all there. And even that person can live in different worlds depending on where they're interacting with people, or whether they're on their own and not coping well, etc.
Okay, yes.
So there's so many worlds to choose from. I'm getting lost here, Harold. You're going to have to jump in.
Yeah, that's good. But, in other words, instead of saying next life or reincarnation, we can talk about rebirth realm, higher level of consciousness,
Yes.
progress of the soul. Any of that will do. In fact, you should just choose language that makes sense to you. But I don't want to stop.
Except it won't do for a Buddhist.
It won't do. But I mean, I want to. How do I keep listening when someone's talking about their belief in reincarnation? The way I keep listening is I translate
Yes.
next life into higher realm. then what they're saying makes sense to me. And I actually bring this up. This is called elevated discourse, or my attempt at it, to bring another perspective to what people are saying that would be inclusive of different world religions,
Mhm.
right? You see, we're supposed to bring about unity. I have to try to be a diplomat or a translator of people's terms. So say, yeah, we're talking about one reality here, and different term, but reincarnation, I don't, to me, it creates more heat than light, more misunderstanding.
For whom? For whom? The Buddhists or
Well, okay, for
others,
who?
us?
Both sides, Westerners and Easterners, I believe. Yeah, and I have found quotations from Buddha and Krishna, which clearly say the goal of life is to get, to either nirvana or the closer to the Atman Brahman, closer to ultimate reality.
Yes.
Baha'is would say spiritual progress, nearness to God, all of those terms are
Yes, of
the
course.
arrow going upward. So the
Yes.
whole thing is, which direction is the arrow going, down or up? And we're trying to go up.
Does reincarnation mean you're not going up?
Precisely. You're reborn in another body, and you're supposed to get beyond this body into higher realms.
But maybe you have learned something and you're carrying on.
Okay, that is how they think of it. Yeah, they think so. The next life in a human body in another country, from other parents, I'll learn other things. I think that's a metaphor, but they think it's, hardcore reality.
And I'm not saying I believe in reincarnation. I'm just exploring. I'm just, a whole world of people out there believe in it. Just like a whole world of people over here believe in something else. So I'm just wondering, right?
I try to let them believe it, but I try to understand what they're saying in terms of that fit with Abdul Baha and fit with even Buddha as I read him, or Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So, major religions make big mistakes. And I think a literal interpretation of reincarnation is one of the mistakes. Just like the Trinity, a hardcore Trinity is a mistake. At least it looks that way, from an interfaith or Baha'i perspective. But I would never call it a mistake. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying it's a mistake. It seems like you're calling it a mistake. I don't know, but you're.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to catch myself. I shouldn't think of it as a mistake. I should think of it as taking something literal that is quite spiritual and beyond, literal terms, beyond physical terms.
That I understand.
Okay.
Isn't that one of the points that Baha'u'llah makes in the Kitab-i-Khan, is that many, many people who have gotten off the track in previous revelations have made the mistake, and he calls it a mistake, of reading their scriptures literally and turning a blind eye to the symbolic nature of some of those statements.
Did Baha'u'llah call that a mistake? I think you're right. So it's a mistake to be too literal. And we have to look for that mistake in ourselves as much as in anyone else. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay, well, let's go on to a less contentious topic, which is
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Nirvana.
to be contentious, but it
I
is.
know. I'm just pulling you.
It's out there. I
Of course it is.
talk to Buddhists. Anyways, I'm just putting it out there.
Well, that's fair.
Thank you.
Okay. So the third noble truth concerns the cessation of suffering. Oh, let me see where we're at on our list here. How about Jennifer? Or did you read already?
Jennifer read
I
it.
read the last one.
See, I didn't take the time to mark you off. Okay, Marie then. Number 5.
Reading number 5. And what, monks, is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? It is the complete fading away and extinction of this craving, its forsaking and abandonment, liberation from it, detachment from it. The Buddha in the long discourses of the Buddha.
Okay. So in other words, the third noble truth is about the ending of thirst for the next thing. Right? We're always lusting for the next thing, for novelty. So if we end the thirst, then we can give our full attention to what is here and now. It involves abandoning attachments to the past, present, or future. It mentions the freedom that comes from contentment and urges us not to rely on cravings so that our minds do not fixate on anything, adhering to it or clinging to it. When craving and other related causes come to an end, suffering ceases. So this is equivalent to nirvana, also known as the unconditioned or unconstructed, the ultimate goal of Buddhism. As an initial spur to striving for nirvana, craving for it may play a role. But this helps in the overcoming of other cravings, is generally replaced by a wholesome aspiration, and is completely eradicated in the full experience of nirvana. Nirvana is only attained when there is total non-attachment and letting go. Nirvana literally means extinction or quenching, being the word used for the extinction of a fire. The fires which nirvana extinguishes are described in the fire sermon. This teaches that everything internal and external to a person is burning with the fires of attachment. In other words, sensual and other forms of lust, hatred and delusion, and of birth, aging, and death. Here, the fires refer both to the causes of suffering and to suffering itself. Nirvana during life is frequently defined as the destruction of these fires or defilements. And we see that in number 6. Okay, and Linda O'Neill is online, I see tonight, so maybe she could read.
The destruction of lust, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion. This, friend, is called Nirvana, the Buddha, disconnected discourses of the Buddha.
Thank you. So when one has destroyed these fires, how do you read my own notes? So a person who has destroyed these fires, when they die, he or she cannot be reborn, and so is totally beyond the remaining fires of birth, aging, and death, having attained final nirvana. In other words, you step off that wheel of the 12 links completely. So there are different kinds of nirvana, believe it or not. There's the one during life. Early Buddhism makes a distinction between the experience of nirvana during life and nirvana beyond death. When it occurs during life, nirvana is understood to be a specific experience in which the defilements are destroyed forever, and in which there is a temporary stopping of all conditioned states. Such a destruction of defilements is clearly a transcendent, timeless experience, for it is said to be deathless and unconditioned. During life, nirvana is where all phenomena stop, followed by a period in which the arising of normal experiences of the world reoccurs. Once obtained, it can be returned to. Beyond death, it is where they stop for good. Descriptions of the nirvanic experience stress its otherness, placing it beyond all limited concepts and ordinary categories of thought. It lies beyond all suffering. It is a sphere where there are neither the 4 physical elements, nor the 4 formless mystical states, or the corresponding heavenly levels of rebirth where only mental phenomena exist. This indicates that it is beyond mind and body. It is also beyond this world or any other world of rebirth. and beyond the arising and ceasing of phenomena in the process of life and rebirth. It is without any support on which it depends and is without any mental object. In the face of nirvana, words falter. For language is a product of human needs in this world and has few resources with which to deal with that which transcends all worlds. Nirvana, it is said, is an aspect of the Dharma which is difficult to understand, beyond abstract reasoning and subtle. The most accurate and least misleading descriptions are negative, saying what it is not. Most synonyms of nirvana are also negative: the stopping of suffering, the unborn, the unbecome, the unmade, the deathless, stopping, non-attachment. Okay, so number 7. How about David Oak?
Sure, glad to do it. I'll even turn my camera on for you.
Hey, there he is.
There I am.
It's a revelation.
Yes. Reading number 7. Positive descriptions of nirvana are generally of a poetic, suggestive nature. Thus, it is said to be the further shore beyond this shore of life and its pains, the cool cave of shelter, a powerful image of peace and rest in the hot Indian climate. Certain positive descriptions give a less poetic indication of its nature. It is the calming of all constructing activities, the highest bliss, the very opposite of dukkha. It is timeless, for it is beyond time, and so is permanent and eternal. Samyutta Nikaya emphasizes the goal as the unconditioned, then adds many synonyms for this, including the taintless, the true reality, the beyond, the very hard to see, the undecaying, the non-manifestive, the unelaborated, the peaceful, the sublime, the amazing, freedom, the unclinging, the island amidst the flood, the refuge. That's Peter Harvey, an introduction to Buddhism.
Thank you. So as you were reading it, the non-manifestive makes me think of the non-manifested face of God in the Baha'i writing. So there are many aspects which are unseen when it comes to the essence of God. Anyway, okay, I see Harold's got a hand up.
Yeah, just briefly, if you tried to describe the kingdom of heaven using Jesus's parables, and if you described nirvana using some of these images that we just heard, or if you looked at what Abdu'l-Baha says about the soul of the kingdom, that's the soul in its very advanced form. There's a lot of serious parallel metaphors, right? So they're talking about a similar reality or the same reality, I believe, using the metaphors that make sense to the people who are learning the lesson.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, this is the kind of thinking I'm hoping to encourage in people, where they can switch from one religion to another easily and can see the overlap in the concepts, even though the language may be different. So, though it is approached and attained by the Noble Eight-Factored Path, nirvana is not caused by it because it is unconditioned. The path is the best of all conditioned states, and nirvana is related to the path as a mountain is related to a path that leads up it. In general, Buddhism sees it as more appropriate to describe this path than to try and precisely describe its goal, which only makes sense given the nature of the goal. Nevertheless, certain passages in the sutras hint that nirvana may be a radically transformed state of consciousness. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Okay. Hang me.
For sure. Number 8. But monk, you should not ask your question in this way. Where do the 4 great elements, the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the air element, cease without remainder? Instead, this is how the question should have been put. Where do earth, water, fire, and air no footing find? Where are long and short, small and great, fair and foul? Where are name and form wholly destroyed? And the answer is, where consciousness is singleness, boundless, all luminous. That's where earth, water, fire, and air find no footing. They're both long and short, small and great, fair and foul. Their name and form are wholly destroyed. With the cessation of consciousness, this is all destroyed.
So you can see some of the repetitive elements that are a feature of the fact that these were oral teachings, so that they could be easily memorized. Right? So as you read his writings, you'll find that there's a tremendous amount of repetition. So I've been selective about it. I thought every once in a while just to give you a taste of it, but there's tons more where that came from. So this passage describes a state beyond the 4 physical elements, where name and form are totally transcended. From the stopping of consciousness, name and form stops. However, consciousness is not non-existent when it stops. It's a crucial point, for it is said to be non-manifestive and endless, and like a sunbeam that is not obstructed by any object in its path. The Theravadan tradition sees nirvana as objectless, but regards consciousness as always having an object. Reading number 8 that we just read is thus interpreted as concerning nirvana as to be known by consciousness. Nirvana is itself the object of the Arahant's consciousness. So what happens to an awakened person beyond death? Does he or she still exist? The Buddha was often asked this question. Could he or she be said that he is or is not? That he both is and is not, or that he is neither is nor is not? These are part of a small set of undetermined questions which the Buddha set aside without answering. Another such question was, does God or an ultimate being exist? He never gave an answer to that. So this is such a key point that I'm going to have 2 readings associated with it. It's a continuous reading. Zilda, could you start us off with number 9?
Sure.
We'll have somebody else finish it.
Oops. Then the wanderer, Vachagata, approached the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, he sat down to one side and said to him, "How is it, Master Gautama? Is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? Is the world infinite? Are the soul and body the same? Is the soul one thing, the body another? Does the Tathagata exist after death, etc.? What, Master Gautama, is the cause and reason why, when wanderers of other sects are asked such questions, they give such answers as, the world is eternal, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death? And what is the cause and reason why, when Master Gautama is asked such questions, he does not give such answers?"
Okay, Peter, let's see the end of that particular passage then.
Vacha, wanderers of other sects regard form as self, or self as possessing form, or form as in self, or self as in form. They regard feeling as self, perception as self, volitional formations as self, consciousness as self, or self as possessing consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. Therefore, when the wanderers of other sects are asked such questions, they give such answers as, the world is eternal, the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death, but Vacha, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, does not regard form as self, or self as in consciousness. Therefore, when the Tathagata is asked such questions, he does not give such answers. The Buddha, the connected discourses of the Buddha.
So let's see if I can summarize this for you. It's a long passage, but one reason for the Buddha's refusal to answer such questions was that he saw speculating over them as a time-wasting diversion from spiritual practice. When one monk told him that he would leave the Sangha unless he was given answers to these questions, the Buddha gave the simile we read in a previous class to show how foolish he was. If a man was shot by a poisoned arrow but refused to let the doctor cure him until he knew everything about who shot the arrow and what the arrow was made of, such a man would soon die. The Buddha went on to say that he had clearly explained suffering and the way beyond it, but that asking the undetermined questions was not connected with nor conducive to nirvana. This aligns with his sayings that he only taught what was both true and spiritually useful. That's why people think that the Buddha didn't believe in God, because it was one of those undetermined questions that would have wasted people's time, taken their time away from doing practical things to improve their own situation. Thus, the Buddha maintained that the questions concerning the existence of an awakened person such as himself after death simply cannot be answered. There are absolutely no grounds for saying that he or she is with or without a body, with or without perception, or neither with nor without perception. While he or she is not annihilated at death, it can't be said that he or she is anything either. His or her indefinable state must be seen as beyond rather than after death, for it must be beyond existence in time. As to what that state is, all that it can be is nirvana, the cessation of conditioned phenomena. So the one who has attained the nirvanic experience and been radically transformed by it is called an arahant. The full experience of nirvana destroys attachment, hatred, and delusion forever. The word arahant means worthy one. That is, one worthy of great respect. He or she is one who has fully completed spiritual training, is fully endowed with all the factors of the path, and has quenched the fires of the defilements. He has overcome the disease of suffering and attained complete mental health. Such a perfected one is described as follows in the Dhammapada. Okie dokie, that would be, is Danielle on? I didn't notice earlier.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Reading number 11. Calm in mind, speech, and action, and released through the right understanding. Such a person is fully at peace. The Dhammapada from Buddha. Sorry.
That's fine, thank you. So the calm actions of the Arahant are such that he or she no longer creates karmic results leading to rebirth. They are just pure spontaneous actions without any future fruit. The balanced detachment of the Arahat's mind is such that while he or she may experience physical pain, perhaps as the result of their own past karma, no mental anguish at this can arise. He is free of aversion to physical pain and so adds no mental pain in response to it. This is because he or she does not identify with the pain as mine, but simply sees it as a non-self passing phenomenon. Though free of fear and craving, the Arahat shouldn't be thought of as apathetic or emotionless. The uprooting of negative emotions eradicates restrictions on such qualities as mental alertness, loving kindness, and compassion. Arahats are not all alike either. Some of them have been noted for specific abilities. Some are specialists in teaching or in psychic powers based on meditation, or in explaining concisely phrased teaching, or in living an ascetic lifestyle. While the Arahat is seen through the delusion of a permanent self or I, he or she nevertheless has an empirical self or character, which is well developed in virtue, meditative calm, and wisdom. The Arahat has a strong mind like a thunderbolt, in which flashes of insight arise, and he has fully developed the 7 factors of awakening, which are these: mindfulness, investigation of Dharma or Dhamma, vigor, joy, tranquility, mental unification, and equanimity. The Arahat is not attracted or repelled by anything, but is independent, detached, free, dissociated, with a mind rid of all barriers. Okay. So that was challenging material, I suspect.
Did someone read number 11 and I missed that?
Yes, you missed it.
Sorry. I was making
Danielle
notes.
just did a beautiful job of reading that. Oh, Leslie, you've got your fingers up. Are you saying hi, or did you have a question or a comment?
I have a question. I mean, you sort of started to answer it in the state of the Arahant. Is that the name of it? So if one is a great Buddhist teacher, one presumably might be in that state. Can you ever fall from that state? I mean, do you have no, once you get to Nirvana and you then will not respond to anything, like do you know what I mean? Like nothing will disturb that, equilibrium that you have come to. And as a teacher of others trying to reach there, you're somehow immune to the factors of the world.
Well, I was talking about the fact that Nirvana, while you're still alive, tends to be an experience that comes and goes. So you're not living in it permanently. So you'll return to normal life and act as not as a normal person, but as a highly enlightened person. So, I mean, the Buddha interacted with people for 45 years after he had reached enlightenment, right? So he was constantly interacting with them, assessing who they were, what level they were at, what they needed to hear in order to help them overcome the suffering that they were personally experiencing. So it was very targeted, if you like. He was constantly aware. That's one of the things that comes with that enlightenment is a perception. It makes me think of Abdu'l-Baha, knowing that a person was sick six streets away and then going to help them because they were sick. That kind of sensitivity is one of the characteristics of somebody at that level.
But they must be very unusual. I mean, Abdu'l-Baha, there wasn't a replica of him or the Buddha, so people who are teachers of Buddhism and are enlightened aren't in the same category. They aren't the same.
Well, let me say that there's a spectrum, right? There's a long scale, and people have experiences all the way along it as they evolve. And some of the ones at the top end of the spectrum come pretty close to being a Buddha. So it would be an interesting question that I'm not in a position to be able to answer at this point, but where would Abdu'l-Baha fit on that spectrum in relation to a Buddha, for instance?
He's a mystery.
Well, yeah. Yes. But there's still part of me that wants to push that a little bit and see if we can figure out a little bit more about the mystery. I'm not content to just let it lie there.
Nor am I.
Okay. Good. Anybody else have a thought or a comment, or are we all just worn out?
Mark, I have a comment. Baha'u'llah said a similar thing. Does the universe have a beginning or does it not have a beginning? Does it have an end or does it not have an end? And I think he in effect says, well, in some ways it had an end, in some ways it, in other words, the biblical account about in the beginning God created the heaven and earth, there's some truth in that. But most of the time he says, no, it has no beginning and no end. But he also says things like, we can't really get that. Our mind doesn't wrap around that. We don't. So he says similar things about the nature of God too. An unknowable essence. And over and over and over describing how little we can understand about God, yet using the term God automatically and frequently in prayers and elsewhere. So I think there's metaphysics there are metaphysical responses in the Baha'i writings, as well as qualifications that most of it is beyond our pay grade. I think the Buddha did similar things, use terms that point to the ultimate and also point out that we can't really get that anyway. And there are more important matters, namely overcoming suffering. So don't worry too much.
Yeah, prioritize, Well, I don't know. It's always a mystery to me as I finish a class as to how to interpret the looks on people's faces. And, what did I screw up or what? It's hard to say. I never know for sure. That's one of the things I miss most about being in the same room with everybody, because then I can read body language and I have some idea. But anyway, so this was a bit abstract tonight. I apologize for that. Next week, we're going to go into the history of Buddhism, which I think you'll find a little more manageable and interesting even. So hang in there, don't give up. Anyway, I guess that's it for tonight. Take care of yourselves.
Aloha, everybody.
Okay.
Everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you,
Yes.
Linda.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everybody. It's been great.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Mark.